Well, thank you, Dr. Lippard. Mayor Frank, we'd like to officially welcome you to the TACIR Commission. We're happy that you're joining us and happy for your recent inclusion on this. And I will, as Cliff said, we will call to order the TACIR local members meeting, which was scheduled for today, and ask April if you'll please call the roll, and then we'll read that statement of purpose.
April?
We ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mayor Anderson? Mayor Bickers?
Here.
Mayor Bradshaw? Mayor Brooks?
Here.
Mayor Frank?
Here.
County Clerk Gaither? Mayor Holland? County Executive Huffman? Mayor McDonald?
Here.
Mayor Waters? Okay, that's the last of the roll. And now Executive Director Lippert will read the statement of necessity.
Thank you, April. And also I wanted to acknowledge that we have a couple of additional guests here that were invited by our local members. I'm not sure if they're all with us now, but I did see at least a few of them have already joined us. I know McMinn County Mayor John Gentry, Blount County Mayor Ed Mitchell, and then also the city manager from Oak Ridge, Mark Watson, have been invited to join the discussion today at the request of some of our local members. So now for the statement of necessity, pursuant to Tennessee Code Annotated Section 410-105A, the Tennessee Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations is to hold meetings quarterly and at such other times as it deems necessary. At its September 29, 2020 meeting, the full commission determined the need to hold a sub-meeting of its local members to review and discuss recommended changes to a draft report on counties with multiple school systems. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic and related safety protocols, it was determined that a physical quorum of the local members could not assemble in person. Therefore, the commission chose to meet via teleconference on October 21, 2020. And that will be filed accordingly within the next 48 hours. And with that, Mayor Brooks, if it's okay with you, we'll go ahead and proceed with Michael and Emma's update.
I think you might be muted.
I think you're muted again, Mayor.
All right, well, here we are. Thanks very much, Dr. Lippard, for those instructions, and please proceed accordingly. And on a personal note, I would like to welcome Mayor John Gentry, fellow Lee alumnus, if he's still listening. Thanks, Cliff.
Here, thank you.
All right. I guess it's me. My name is Michael Mount, and I followed by my colleague Emma Johnson, will be giving a brief overview and update on the draft report. The draft report on the effects of sharing of resources in counties with more than one school system was prepared in response to Senate Joint Resolution 593, sponsored by Senator Hale, which directs the commission to study the overall effect on public K-12 education in Tennessee of the laws and regulations related to the sharing of resources among an operation of multiple school systems located in the same county. Senate Joint Resolution 593 further notes that the creation of a new school district has created conflict regarding the ownership of existing school buildings and facilities. In response, this report also considers options for the transfer of school property to a new city school system. Since the draft report was prepared for the January 2020 meeting, staff has made revisions clarifying and updating information regarding the mixed drink tax. Staff has also updated the information regarding a new school building in Jonesboro, Tennessee, and my colleague Emma Johnson will provide some more detail about these issues after I'm finished. Before the January 2020 meeting, some other changes were made to the draft. Staff added maps and tables showing the school systems by county, the number and type of school systems by county, and grades served by school system. Information about the new school building in Jonesboro. And we added information on Tennessee statutes and case law pertaining to the building transfer issues. And we, in response to concerns raised by some local government officials, we added clarifying language regarding student and taxpayer inequities and added a call for further study by a task force of stakeholders to develop a set of specific legislative proposals for consideration by the Governor and General Assembly. Other than the alternative regarding the mixed drink tax, which I said Emma will get into, which was dropped, the suggested alternatives remain largely unchanged from the draft report. All of the changes are highlighted in yellow in the report. And with that, I'll happily turn it over to Emma.
Thanks, Michael. Good afternoon. My name is Emma Johnson, and as Michael mentioned, I'm going to just highlight a few of the recent updates to our draft report. The first update relates to the distribution of mixed drink tax revenue in counties with more than one school system. Previous versions of the draft report included a recommendation to remove the expiration in state law on provisions that determine the distribution of mixed drink tax revenue. When the law was amended in 2014 to reflect the current formula, it included an expiration date since there was ongoing litigation surrounding the previous distribution statute. The General Assembly removed this expiration date this session, so we likewise removed our mixed drink tax recommendation. We've also included language in the report clarifying the circumstances under which cities with a city school system are required to share their mixed drink tax revenue as it is described in the current law. The second update relates to a proposed new school in Jonesboro, Tennessee. In the section of the draft that discusses sharing requirements for capital expenditures, we included language describing a lease purchase agreement between Washington County and Jonesboro for the construction of a new school. We explained that Washington County is negotiating a fund sharing agreement with Johnson City Schools to avoid being sued over the question of whether sharing is required by state law. Since we last updated the draft report, Washington County has approved an agreement under which it will pay Johnson City $12.5 million over a 25-year period for the city's capital education needs, and we plan to further revise the draft report to reflect this update. I'm happy to answer questions about these updates or any other aspects of our draft report.
So while we're waiting to see if there are any questions, I'd just like to take a moment and thank our local members who have worked with us on addressing some of the concerns with earlier drafts of the reports, particularly in tone, and making sure that we're giving due credit where it was deserved, and also to the Tennessee Municipal League and the Tennessee County Services Association, who worked with us, going back and forth with them and some of their members on also addressing concerns with the earlier drafts of the report. I'm hoping that we've struck a balance that talks about all the relevant issues, gives some constructive recommendations, and puts forward really more food for thought for future studies and future work by the General Assembly. And with that, we're happy to open the discussion and take any questions that members or our guests may have.
Well, I appreciate, go ahead, whoever that was.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Mayor Frank.
Oh, okay. Well, I tried to study this extensively, and I realize I'm just now coming on board, but just a couple of questions I have. One, when you are considering the local revenue, is there any kind of impact that tuition payments? So for instance, in the city of Oak Ridge, they do have students from Anderson, Roane, and even other counties, and they do charge a level of tuition. So 3,000 plus for students in Anderson or Roane, and then outside is 7,000 plus. Is that reflected in those revenue numbers by chance, or any other systems that do tuition?
So I'll let Michael and Emma address that, but I will note that this is an issue that was brought up at one of our commission meetings. I believe it was
Okay.
Mayor Bickers who brought it up originally, but this is something that definitely was of interest. Michael, Emma?
I can refer to local revenue in the report. What we are referring to is the data that we received from the Department of Education. And I'm actually going to just pull that up real quick on my PC and look at it. We call it the local revenue file. It's actually the same data that we used to calculate fiscal capacity.
Okay.
And it does include, of course, things like taxes and tax revenue, and it also has many other kinds of revenue in it. And I'm looking right now, there does seem to be a code for under charges for current services, and one of those codes says tuition for regular day students, tuition for adult students is another one, tuition for summer school is another one. So it does appear that tuition is part of the local revenue data.
Great. And my only other question, and by the way, this is just excellent work. It was very impressive, and I've read it thoroughly once, and I'll go through and read it again. The only other question I had was on page 47, you're mentioning eliminating overlapping tax bases among school systems, and then there's a graph that talks about independent versus dependent systems. And I don't want to go back over territory because I know, again, I'm just now joining you. So if I apologize if I'm asking a question that you all have already dealt with, but are you, is this recommending that we look at that as a legislative change? And the only reason I ask that is when I was looking at the chart of independent and dependent school systems by state, and you mentioned how there's difficulty in doing comparison. I just did a quick Google on, best performing systems. I looked at Wallet Hub. I looked at US News and World Report. And so when it comes to performance or safety and some of the other measures, it's not so clear. I know you all are looking at, sharing of resources, but it's not so clear in terms of outcome whether one is better than the other. And so I just thought I would ask that if that was a topic that you all discussed, or you actually making that as a recommendation, if you don't mind talking a little bit more about that.
Sure, I can talk about it. To answer your first question, there's no recommendation that's specifically tied to this information.
Okay.
This was added to the report in response to conversations with some members. I think one of them being Chairman Carter talked about this with us. Okay. That we needed to acknowledge that Tennessee is different from the majority of states, and that most of our school systems are dependent school systems, whereas the usual case in the United States is for independent school systems. And we emphasize throughout the report, I hope, that we are in a unique situation as far as how we fund our schools. And so one of our points being that it's hard to look at other states as an example of how other states deal with this exact situation, because we are unique in our funding structure in Tennessee.
Touching back on Mayor Frank's comment on tuition students, there may be if I remember correctly, and my memory is faulty these days, in our discussions, there is an accounting for dollars that may be received by city school systems. There is no accounting that identifies the number of tuition students that would be attending, that otherwise would be attending county schools. So there would be an assessment made of how many BEP dollars are flowing out of the county schools with those students to the city schools. And the tuition dollars doesn't really tell us that. It simply is how many dollars do they have coming in for all the tuition students. It doesn't tell us the impact of those tuition students as to the dollars that otherwise would be available to the county systems. And you know, that's what I remember. If I'm remembering that right, Dr. Mount.
Right, you're correct. The other impact besides the tuition itself is the fact that the BEP funding, for example, follows a student to his or her new school system.
Melissa Brown, our Deputy Executive Director, has something to add on the tuition topic. Dave, does she have? Can you give her the ability to speak if she doesn't already have it, please?
I think I can. Can you hear me?
There we are. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Mayor, the other issue about tuition is there can be agreements locally. So sometimes there's no tuition paid. A school system will allow the children of teachers or cafeteria workers to attend the school out of their normally assigned district if the parent works in the school system. And the other issue is that it's not just county and city students within the same county. There can be cross county lines where tuition can be paid. So that adds to the issue you're describing and trying to track where are those students and where would they be attending. The other issue even is, well, I was to say the other issue would be open enrollment, but it would be in a single system county. But it's possible, and it happens near me where students cross county lines to attend school.
Thanks, Melissa. I believe Mayor McDonald also had a comment.
Of course. You did a great job. You always do. However, I disagree with a number of items in here, as I've told you all in the past. It does lean heavily on the tiny towns lawsuit and the language used there. It appears to me to lack some thought outside of that about what could be if laws like the one you were just talking about with independent schools, if those were adjusted to that way, it stays within what exists and doesn't think outside of that to what the legislature could do to change the way things are, even though I know, you know, that's a real taboo for a lot, but I still feel like it because of the way it's written in using primarily those couple of court cases instead of thinking about what new legislation could come, that it leans heavily on those that would not allow citizens living within a city to pay more money to educate their children. And I think there ought to be a statewide amount, and the legislature should address that, whatever that number is. And then if after all of that is done, a municipality or other jurisdiction wanted to spend more money on education, they should not be banned from doing that. And this in essence does that. So I still am very concerned about the rights of people and desires that we're blocking without having assessed the, we have a broken formula. The BEP formula is broken. And so I'll just leave it with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Of course, the difficulty in making more far-reaching recommendations is always, of course, finding a consensus on those recommendations. So, this is, I agree with you, this is more of an overview report with incremental improvements, which is what we were able to reach consensus on, at least recommendations for incremental improvements. That's not to say that we shouldn't continue to look at these issues going forward. Hopefully, some of the issues related to the BEP could be addressed if the General Assembly were to take our recommendation in one of our other reports from this year to heart and conduct a top to bottom review of the components of the basic education programs, cost components, using a group, either the BEP review committee or a similar group of stakeholders from across the various levels of government and parts of the state. But yes, absolutely, lots of other things that could be done potentially. That said, other comments from other panelists or guests? Don't be shy.
This is John Gentry in McMinn County, and I guess I still have the battle scars from the court system and the legal bills to go with it over what we thought the law said. Obviously, the courts agreed. But at the same time, as county mayor, I represent city citizens. And so I guess I've always come down that basic form of government, cities exist to provide a higher level of service. And I've always agreed that if they want to and are willing to tax themselves more, they have that right to do so. And if they think that's going to provide a better educational system, that is their right to do so and encouragement to do so. So I've never had an issue with that. Our issue was about the funding formula. The mandate, if a county had to do a capital improvement, it had to be shared. And I know the arguments to and fro, it's something that I know that we're kind of experienced here in Athens, and we're all unique. I understand that the city of Athens school system right now is undergoing consolidation from 5 schools to eventually 2 schools. And what's interesting, one of the extra schools that they're looking at closing was built in the 70s, that was built from extra money that came in from county issued debt that otherwise would have never been built. And now they're closing it. And so, and I've had city residents say, hey, we don't like that formula because we're still, if the county had to borrow 100 for McMinn County, we had to borrow 100 million for county schools, we'd really have to borrow 125 million. And city residents pay that debt as well. And so we were hearing some of that. And so I guess I always want to make sure that somewhere in the report that city taxpayers also are in consideration, that they help pay that county debt as well. And so that law is already written, and I know it, but if you're paying cash, and that's what we've gone to, obviously, we've gone to a pay-as-you-go system, and the county hasn't issued debt since 1991. And we do everything through a strategic planning process, working with our Board of Education, every department, and we do 5-year plans, and we kind of, most things, despite what a lot of us sometimes say are not emergencies, we kind of see what's coming down the road. And we plan for those things. And county commission's always worked with us to allow us to set aside monies in capital fund that, 3 years we need to add a gymnasium. We've got the money to pay cash to pay for that gymnasium. And that's just kind of work for us. But education's tough. I look at the formula for my friends in Sevier County. And while I know we do a lot of shopping there, I see, boy, they don't get much for their taxes they send to Nashville. They're paying much heavier share on a local level. And then I'm getting compared to other counties that they spend more per student. And then I have to show people, yeah, but they get more from the state per student than we do. We actually give, you know, so it's a tough formula. My heart's out to the legislature of always trying to figure this out. I guess they probably stay up at night, someone does, thinking what's the next liability? What happens if a group of citizens from one of these more affluent communities sue and say, hey, we're not getting our money back that we're sending in, you know? So I think it's a great overview. I think if I was a brand new county mayor or county commissioner, this is a great tool to explain to me how funding works for education. So there's value in this report for no other reason than that, to educate public officials. So I do appreciate the opportunity to be asked here today and to attend. If there's anything I can answer from anyone, kind of what we went through, I'll be glad to do so.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. I had
Mayor Gentry, this is City Mayor Kevin Brooks, and with your permission, I'm going to play this tape back for my county mayor for his enjoyment and listening.
Gary's a friend until you play that back.
So I had a question in the chat from one of our guests, Mark Watson. I'm going to unmute him. I think yes, I can do that. Mr. Watson, do you want to? You said you had a question.
Yeah, there you go. I hope you can hear me today.
Sure.
And thank you for including me, you know, on the visitation today. I want to first compliment Mr. Mount and Ms. Johnson on adding items into the report. I think one of the things that we are seeing at a municipal level is the ups and downs and swings and upstarts economically, and whether that's a municipality or a county, and you see an industry that shuts down, the reaction time that we have under these systems really become important. And it may not be the impact on a school system, and that I've just had a contract with the Department of Energy that they've decided to cut in half. So we're down $1 million. You know, how do you make that up and still have fire service within the community? But you have to maintain the level of school services that go along. And this is just a thought perhaps for Mr. Mount and Ms. Johnson, as we look at economic swings, whether it's a brigade of soldiers leaving Clarksville and impacting the school system, is that is now done on a 3-year averaging type basis, as opposed to a single year. You have to have some immediacy on that. And that's what I'm hearing from some of the other city situations that we have out here in municipal systems. So you're trying to balance all of the differing aspects of service, not just the school, but then you're limited in how you can react to the economics of your community. And I would just say that's something to consider. I would say that's something that you have to look at, look at here down the road. I mean, that's why we're fighting over mixed drink taxes and trying to figure out where the sources come from. I know Mayor Frank and I have worked very closely on such things as tax increment districts to make some things happen, but she's dealing with 2 municipal school systems and 1 county system in Anderson County. And so both Clinton and the city of Oak Ridge are running their own independent thing. And one of the things that we see are the capital needs that come up. I know it probably won't go up in this report, but I've always felt that if you're putting on a new roof or repairing a school with sizable dollars, that the sales tax ought to be exempt for the school systems on that. We're not going to have people that can do that within our own city systems, but I think it may be something to consider. So as I look at the economics within the communities and the municipal school systems, if you can't if you can't adjust as things happen within your community, we need to have a faster system in place. And so, and it all boils down to money. You got enough money to operate in a particular year or not, or do you raise taxes? Because it's usually not adding other educational services in, it's trying to sustain the existing services. So thank you for letting me make a couple comments.
Thank you, Mr. Watson.
Hey, Cliff, this is Tom Bickers again.
Mayor?
I believe the consensus of our county and municipal members was that the BEP formula designed to create equity was in fact creating inequity. Yeah. And it's broken and needs to be fixed. You know, that virtually nobody understands how it works. And do we need a basic funding system in the state that virtually nobody in the legislature understands how it works? I didn't get the sense in the report as drafted, and just reading it in its entirety, that and maybe this just my reading, I didn't get the sense that we were suggesting that to the legislature, that they really need to take a hard look at that formula and try to see if we can't come up with something that creates a greater sense of fairness in both our cities and counties, but is also something much easier for everybody to understand how it works.
So, Mayor, since this report was focused on just those counties with multiple school systems, and the BEP affects all systems statewide, even those with one counties, we had decided, and we talked about this at an earlier meeting, but it was kind of a side note, we had decided to address that issue in our system in our second interim report on local revenue and expenditures, which that report was approved earlier this year, and that's the one that included the recommendation that there be a review of the basic education program components to determine whether they were the right mix, whether they're the right amounts, et cetera. So we chose to address that issue in that report, since it dealt with all school issues, and to try to keep this report focusing on just those that were more particular to counties with multiple school systems.
Okay, I mean, I understand, and I guess there's some value in redundancy and communicating with the legislature that this really is important.
Well, we did, and I don't disagree with you. We actually referred back to the BEP component recommendation in the final draft report on local revenue and expenditures, which you'll be seeing at this coming meeting in early November. But we can certainly refer to the recommendation again in this report, just as a note that this issue, which goes beyond just multiple school systems, counties, so we hit them again and again with the recommendation.
Yeah, I tend to think that sometimes you got to hit them 2 or 3 times before they get it. Yeah. And so I would, even if we just drop a note somewhere to say, look, this is we're again reminding you that the BEP is an issue that's got to be reevaluated, because there's a great sense among the cities and counties, at least some of them, that it's not working the way it should.
Mayor Brooks?
Thanks, Dr. Lippert. As a recovering legislator myself, I would 100% concur with Mayor Bickers, and it was referenced by Mayor McDonald 20 minutes ago. And I do think that adding some sort of preliminary sentence towards the beginning of this report, referencing back that we believe the BEP is not working as a commission, I think Mayor Bickers hits it right on the head, as brought up first by Mayor McDonald, that it just somehow needs to be referenced multiple times. I'm fearful, when I was in the legislature, Senate Finance Chairman Bill Watson, who's still there, and departed Chairman Charles Sargent, who passed away, they were leading the charge on having that reviewed and looked at, because ultimately, as Finance, Ways and Means in both the House and Senate, they were the ones getting complaints that we're not getting enough money. And every time we passed a balanced budget and teachers got a raise, city mayors got to enjoy it, but my county mayors did not. And it was brought up all the time about the disparity. So I concur with both mayors Vickers and McDonald that we need to somehow reference it back in a way that's respectful, but at the same time, this report, as Mayor Gentry talked about, is incredibly educational, but we can also use it as a tool to reiterate, no disrespect, Dr. Fox, but your BEP is not working.
I think Dr. Fox would say that he only had a piece of it. So, but and on the a couple of notes, I would say that first of all, it was the late Chairman Sargent's request that led to our revenue and expenditure report that we're wrapping up next month. So I wish he could be here to see the results of his efforts. Second, as far as the full committee, I don't think the full committee has taken a position on whether or not the BEP overall is broken or not. I don't know if our legislative members, for example, have weighed in on that, and our executive branch members, but most certainly there was a consensus at the meetings that the components themselves of the BEP, that it is certainly worthwhile to look at those, and I agree we can work that into the languages report, referring back to our earlier recommendation and noting this is a bigger overarching issue that affects more than just the counties being discussed in this report, but all of education in the state of Tennessee.
Well, I know at least one of our members of the legislature that serves on TACIR, he really doesn't like to talk about anything except how much more they're spending on education than they were a year or two ago. And that's great. I mean, there is more money, but it doesn't solve the formula problem. And so they are very skittish about trying to get back into that. I serve also on the BEP commission, and you know, they're all educators, and they're afraid you know, to open this can unless they get to say so who's doing that, setting those parameters. So but I agree that we need to say something in the beginning that while there is an appreciation for the additional funding, they said something about 200 million over the last few years. I'm not sure about that number, but that certainly is helpful. But the BEP formula is not does not meet the goals it was set up to do, and I really think we've got to put that. You know me, I'm still licking my wounds because you guys won't put Prescott and Lennox up closer to the front of the report. It's stuck back in a footnote in the back. So you know, I know what it feels like to be stuck in the back.
Thank you, Mayor. I feel compelled, and I'm not going to go too far down this road because it'll get me in trouble, but to channel my predecessor as executive director, Lenise Rourke Patrick, who whenever people started raising concerns with the BEP, would acknowledge it. Yes, there are issues with the BEP that need to be worked on, but be careful what you ask for, because she would remind us of the situation we had with the Tennessee Foundation program before the BEP was approved, which was much more of a arbitrary political what was available at the time, and without even the semblance of a formula. That's not to say that there isn't work to be done with the BEP, but we always get a little concerned in the education finance community in Tennessee when people just talk about throwing it out, because you've got to be careful what you replace it with. There, I went too far on that one. Someone else?
So I was just going to say to Mayor Bicker's points, Mayor McDonald's, one of the items that you pointed out in there is you have it on page 37 about, the county level fiscal capacity and the system level fiscal capacity issue and how, the disparities. Yes, right there. I mean, maybe there is a way, that's kind of a passive way of saying it should be addressed. I mean, you're addressing it from that standpoint, but it also makes the point that it is part of the disparity that exists within the BEP. So maybe there's a way to emphasize that in the summary pages.
Certainly, and this is, Mayor Frank, this is something that we have brought up a number of times over the years, and I think we give that a shout back, Michael, in one of the reports earlier this year, referring to our earlier recommendations in terms of system level fiscal capacity and county and mismatch between that and the county structure.
This draft includes references to those earlier studies from like the mid 2000s and those the stakeholders groups that were put together to study the issue back then. We reference those here.
Okay. But yeah, maybe we can look at mentioning that up further to the front too. We'll take a look at the language there. But anything else? So I think where we are is we are going to work in some language near the very front on referring to our recommendation from our second interim report in the local revenue and expenditure on a comprehensive review of BEP components. And then we're also going to look and see if we can highlight our further up to close to the front in the executive summary, our earlier work talking about system level versus county level. So it's not a perfect product, but I think we're closer to addressing the concerns.
Dr. Lippert, earlier in the Zoom call, you mentioned that we did not need to vote on this today. Is there any action by the local?
No, we just want to make sure that we are at least identifying any open remaining problems with it, some of which we're able to address, and others I just don't think we are and reach consensus, so that we hopefully make a little bit more progress so that when we bring this up at the November meeting, and maybe we will not have a unanimous approval of the report, but hopefully we'll have addressed enough of the local members' concerns that we can approve the report and conclude it. And also, my hope here is that through this and through the conversations we've had with the Tennessee Municipal League and the Tennessee County Services Association and their members, that we have at least acknowledged all the concerns and responded to the concerns of their members in local government across the state. So the short answer is no, Mayor Brooks, we don't really require any action today. But I do have one other announcement if there's no other questions.
I just have a comment. Even though I am on this particular topic, the contrarian, I do again want to thank particularly staff for the work that they've done putting this together. This is no small matter, and I recognize that. And you all have heard me before. I believe you're all brilliant and talented. This is just one of those times for me where I have a different idiom, and it's not personal. It's just what it is. So thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you, Mayor. That's definitely appreciated. And we all know we can't all agree on everything all the time, but we're a forum to discuss these issues, and hopefully we'll get a little bit more agreement every time we sit down. I did want to let our members know you're going to have another opportunity to provide us with information here over the next week or so. You'll be hearing from one of our other research teams. All of our local members will. We are, as a spinoff of our public infrastructure needs inventory report this year, we are looking at issues related to infrastructure needs that maybe have expanded or perhaps contracted as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the concurrent economic downturn, or at least temporary. And so they are going to be reaching out to our local members. We're going to be doing a survey of our infrastructure, the normal people we interview in the infrastructure process, but we want to talk to our local members first to make sure we're asking the right questions on this little spinoff report we're doing. So you'll be hearing from some of our team members on that, hopefully over the next week. All right. Mayor Brooks, did you have any other issues?
Just the only other question would be with Governor Lee's recent electronic meeting extension. I think by default, our November meeting will be held in this same format electronically.
That's correct, and we had actually, you may recall, we talked about that at the last meeting, and the membership had decided that they would prefer to meet electronically at our November meeting and then make the call at that time on how to proceed with our December meeting. And then we will be, caught up until January, and then we get started over again.
Sounds like the December meeting was decided for us. And as a fellow COVID survivor, I'm not the least bit upset about it.
No, we're happy to do whatever we need to do to keep everyone safe and relatively carefree. So, okay. Any other issues for the group then? Well, thanks again to everyone who attended, and thank you to our guests and their participation. And again, one last time, my thanks to Michael and Emma on their excellent work on this report, and all the other TACIR people who have contributed to it kind of behind the scenes. All right, well, if there's nothing else, then I guess we will, Mayor Brooks, if you care to adjourn us.
That's a motion to adjourn, which is non-debatable.
All right, very good. Thank you all.